All right, everyone, let's get started. Thank you for joining the second App Engine Academy. So definitely appreciate you spending time today to talk about App Engine. I introduced myself at the last Academy, but just very quickly, say I'm a principal outbound product manager specific to App Engine, and I'm a pro developer specialist on the platform. So nice to meet everyone today. And thanks again for joining. Start out with just a little bit of housekeeping. We always make a safe harbor statement around any forward-looking statements that we might be making in the webinar today. I don't believe we'll have any, but if some pop up, we'll definitely let you know. And, this webinar is just one of many on live at ServiceNow. And so it's a great opportunity to just find a lot of awesome content, both related to App Engine and Automation Engine, products and Creator, but really across the ecosystem. So we definitely encourage you to check out live on ServiceNow and all of the different sessions and content that are available really across all of the different product workflows and related to the platform as well. So certainly feel free to check those out. There's a lot of great ones that I enjoy attending as well. Just a little housekeeping. We will have some time at the end for Q&A. Last session, it was the first one that I had ran, and so I had some problems getting people off mute. But, as we're going through the different slides, I'd love for it to be conversational. So if you have something to add or a question that's certainly generally applicable, please raise your hand and I can bring you off mute. Love to hear from you. More specific questions, if we could keep those till the end, we can cover those in the Q&A. But also, we're going to add a App Engine office hours as well. So the App Engine Academy is the first Wednesday of every month. We are canceling it on, or it's been canceled for January 1st. I don't think anyone will be particularly interested in a webinar the day after New Year's Eve, but we're hoping to start the App Engine office hours. That'll be the second Wednesday of the month at the same time, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And that will either start next month or probably in February. So we don't schedule any live at ServiceNow events at the first half of January. So please check out live on ServiceNow. There'll be a registration link to sign up for the App Engine office hours. That'll be an opportunity for you to directly talk to the product management team like myself, and we'll also engage some of our awesome creator SEs for some conversations so you can ask specific questions then. And we'll probably be adding new product demos in the office hours as well. For the App Engine Academy, we want to keep it mostly architecturally focused. So definitely please sign up for the office hours, and that'll just be more Q&A time, and we can answer more of your questions there. So we'd love to see you at the App Engine office hours. And again, that's the second Wednesday of the month, and it'll either be starting in December or February. All right, so last Academy, we talked about sort of solutioning and how App Engine fits into the bigger picture, right? Into the App Engine ecosystem. And so we want to expand that conversation some today, where we want to talk about how to think about the platform and how to use a building block approach to map the different capabilities that the platform provides to business requirements. And so that's a really important part of App Engine. I mean, part of App Engine is, being able to connect to the business demand and then generate value at the end of it. And so we think that, if you clearly understand how to break the platform down into its simplest pieces, it's much easier take requirements and basically assemble those different building blocks to sequence the different workflows that you need to. And then we're going to shift a little bit and talk about data modeling. We're going to first talk about catalog items and record producers. There's a lot of confusion around that, and rightfully so, because they're very similar. But we want to make sure everyone understands that, and then we'll look at data modeling for custom apps, because there's the way that you kind of design your data hierarchy and the model for your applications, as we'll see, really can influence the ability of control, maintainability, and just how easy it is to maintain the application going forward. So we'll talk about the data modeling, and then also have some time for Q&A. But like I said, feel free to raise your hand and we can get you off mute while we're going through the presentation, if it's if it's a general comment or question. So I'd love to hear from you during the presentation. All right. So the first thing I wanted to say, we are going to get to live building, and we are going to get into the platform. The plan is we're going to start doing that at the next App Engine Academy in December. And so the nice thing is we're going to be doing that in ServiceNow Studio, right? The upcoming developer tool set that is going to be released very shortly here. It's awesome. One of my favorite capabilities about ServiceNow Studio is you can edit across scopes. So no hopping around, and switching different scopes. You can edit multiple scopes in the same time. The way that they do it is the tabs are color coded. So very cool. So excited to start building and actually look at some of these concepts that we've been talking about in action and seeing them run. But also, very excited about ServiceNow Studio and just kind of this really modern experience. And it really threads the needle and is great for both low code builders and also pro code development. And so just a very exciting new tool that's available as a platform entitlement coming right up. So we will, this session today is mostly around theory and kind of how to structure the application and think about how to build workflows. Starting next month, we're going to transition a little bit more to actually live building in the platform. So I'm looking forward to that, and probably everyone else is too. So very exciting. Okay, so like I said, last time we talked about sort of where App Engine fits and what the relationship is to out-of-the-box products, and so that's an extremely important decision framework to understand to successfully use the platform. So today, what we really want to focus on is some implementation considerations when building an application. And so we're going to start with how to think about taking different requirements or taking different steps in the use case and understanding how to map those quickly to the platform. And so this is a capability map that we looked at last week. What I'm going to do here is just kind of move this around a little bit, because what we want to do is really distill this down to the core building blocks of the platform when we're sequencing a business process. And so if we move this to layers, we can think about how this workflow started, how this business process has started, the things that people need to accomplish in service delivery or fulfillment, and then the capabilities that the platform can do to introduce automation and even more efficiency into this business process. So let's just step through these. There's a variety of ways that we can start a business process. Certainly a requester or user that is going to realize value from the platform can come into the service catalog and submit a request. They can do it through a conversational interface or through mobile or email or through a web service call. This process can even be triggered by a database event locally to ServiceNow, right, where there's an update to a record that triggers a business process. So there's a variety of ways that this business process can start. But if we think about it, What we really have is this workflow element where the platform can adjust the different work pathways in this business process. It can look at attributes of the different records or of the different data that's being accumulated in this process, and then assign work to different users or to different groups. And in general, this work is either an approval or a task. And so, this is really the first step in the journey, and we'll actually look at a use case where, what we want to do is introduce this structured work component, right? We want to consistently handle the business process that is executed based on this trigger. And the benefits that we realize from these are the same as the same as how we benefit from out of the box products, right? When things are done in a structured way, a consistent way, now we can measure them. We can introduce KPIs. We can have dashboards to understand exactly where these different work units are. And then we can also introduce this end-to-end visibility, right? And so what we're doing is essentially take what's traditionally tribal knowledge or unstructured work and make sure that, basically the same work is happening in the same way, regardless of who is performing the fulfillment. But where things really get interesting is when we start augmenting the things that people need to do on the platform with things that the platform can do to make their life easier or to make this business process more efficient. Right. So certainly we have the database, right? We have all of the data associated with this business process. We can receive the request, we can add additional information to it, we can change it, we can create subtasks or additional records that are side effect of this business process. But what we can also do now is utilize elements of the system to make a decision where we can take different attributes of previous steps of the business process and determine an outcome using a structured decision framework. Thirdly, and this is when we talk about prediction and inference, this is around machine learning and generative AI, right? So prediction is traditional supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning, the predictive intelligence component of the platform. And what we can do here is we can utilize our knowledge of how things have occurred in the past and take that pattern to make a prediction as to what is going to happen in the future. And so one good example of that is based on how long it's taken similar incidents to be remediated, what is our time to resolution that we expect for this new incident? So that's how we can utilize machine learning to make a prediction. Now, inference that's Now Assist, right? So that's the generative AI component of ServiceNow. And so that's a little bit different than a prediction, because what an LLM will do when it's making this inference is we can take content that's available from the business process that's already been accumulated, we can adjust it, and then we can pass it to the LLM and guide it to make that content smaller or easier to understand, or larger, and give us a number of steps that might be needed to be accomplished to achieve a certain goal. And so the important thing to understand around this traditional machine learning, the prediction, again, is looking into the history of what's occurred in an instance. We can make a prediction about what will happen in the future. Another example is if you think about real estate, based on a zip code and the number of bathrooms and bedrooms, and the number of houses that have been sold, the comps, now we can make a prediction as to how the house or what the value of another similar house might be worth. Now, the inference, again, is going to take information that's been specifically provided to the LLM. And then, like I said, it's going to adjust that information, whether it makes it more compact or easier to understand, whether it takes something that requires industry knowledge and explains it clearly without domain-specific terminology. That inference can basically adjust the content based on the demands of the business process. And then integrations and RPA, right? These are great. And so, the difference again is that an integration is going to be the direct instrumentation of a web service endpoint, where an RPA is going to instrument a UI where it will basically perform the clicks and data entry that someone might do if they were the ones who are actually performing those actions. And so this is a very minor oversimplification of the platform. Sorry, I'm going to take just one drink here. But if you understand, or if you can take these different concepts, what we really can do now is take a look at a business process and very quickly start thinking about how are we going to sequence this process to realize value from the ServiceNow platform. And so we're going to talk about this in the concept or in the area of custom applications. But the great thing about App Engine is, the App Engine is the whole platform, really. It was Fred Letty's original idea of very, very easily being able to build workflows to accomplish work in an enterprise. And so the nice thing about App Engine is these are basically the same fundamental building blocks that all of the out-of-the-box workflows are composed of. So if we can look at it in these terms, not only can you think about how can we build custom applications for a specific use case, but how can I very quickly understand what an out-of-the-box product workflow does? Because really, it's these building blocks combined with a best practice like ITIL for ITSM, or an industry data model like public sector or FSO, right? So this is a really good lens to look at not only custom application development, but then also just to understand how the platform works as a whole. So let's look at an example use case. And so, last session we talked a little bit about a marketing department, how we might structure these the different workflows that they might need. And so here's an example from an actual customer where they have this process that requires a number of different departments to work in concert to serve a marketing design request. You can see there's the copywriter and the designer that actually are going to generate the work product. But then we also have, the manager that's going to review and review the request and assign it, and also legal and branding teams that will be involved with the feedback and review. So if what we can do here, though, is take a look at, again, the workflow elements, right? How are we going to route the work? How are we going to make decisions based on what's accomplished in the business process, and assign approvals and tasks to the individuals and departments that are involved in fulfillment of this request. But what we can also do is, dovetail that with all of these different platform capabilities. So if we look at the most basic element, and this doesn't have, the looping and the routing, obviously, if the legal team or branding rejected the request and required revisions, but that's really just adding the logic, right? That's adding based on the outcome of a particular action in the business process, what do we want to do next? And so that's just introducing the logic element. But so if we look at this in very simple terms, what we have is a requester, right, that's initiating the business process. And then we have these workflow elements where we're identifying who needs to do what, right? So initially, the design manager can review and assign the task. This task will be assigned to the copywriter to create the written content, and then the graphic designer. And then now what we can do is we can introduce logic to, in parallel, request these different approvals. So this is a good first step in evaluating a incoming business demand or a use case, and then lining up all of those different building blocks where we can get to value very quickly. But what we can do also now is take a look at identifying automation opportunities, right? Because we can utilize all of these platform components to think about, what are the things that people are doing manually right now? And maybe how can we replace these, make them easier to achieve, or simplify it in a way where, a broader number of people across varied skill sets might be able to perform these tasks. So one way we can do this is we can look at this task that's assigned to the copywriter for this written content. And remember how we talked about inference, the Now Assist capability where we can utilize generative AI for an LLM. If the copywriter is creating text, if they're creating copy to be utilized in this design request, if we have enough detail, right, from the requester, what we can do is utilize the LLM to generate suggestions of the copy. And so now all the copywriter needs to do is approve one of those choices. And so there's a number of concepts here that is important. So one is, design of this data model, right? Because what we really want to do is have enough information that we're receiving from the requester that we can introduce this efficiency to guide an LLM to generate this copy. And so, if you think about this here, what we're really doing is we're greatly reducing the effort for the copywriter. And when we look at the value of this business process or of this implementation, this is where it gets really easy to draw a line to, we've reduced the effort for this copywriter 20% based on something that they have to do 10 times a week. So now we can quantify the amount of time they're spending it. And then if we can also determine what the value of each hour that copywriter is doing from a dollar per standpoint, then we can draw a true line to real dollars saved. And so that's one of the things that we're really trying to accomplish here, right? It's not only to introduce the structured work, but to also introduce the efficiency that we can measure. Oop, and then I clicked here, but this, was previously an approval that was performed by someone on the branding team. But this, again, might be an opportunity to use decision tables, right? Another capability of the platform where we can configure the platform to determine, to filter decisions based on data attributes that were already defined in previous steps of the business process. And so a good example of this might be, let's say this marketing design request is internal only. So maybe, someone on the branding team does not need to approve that. Or if it's a slight modification where the modifications we identified were, predefined, that branding has already decided that they did not need to review those. So again, this connection of identifying work that a team or individuals is performing, designing the data model where we have enough information to then connect it to this platform capability where we can make a decision and reduce more work. And so this is just a good example, relatively simple, of how we can take this use case, break it down into the different steps that need to be followed for this business process, map it to these capabilities on the right, and then start looking at how can we drive even more value out of this. And so there's a lot of latent benefits from this. So because we're always doing it in the same way, now we can introduce different steps, different stages in this business process. So some of these require a fair amount of time for someone to do, like maybe a graphic designer needs several days on it. If we understand and consistently follow this exact same pathway, now we can start measuring and comparing those. And then all of a sudden, you have the data to inform a prediction, right? Because we've developed enough history that we can understand, based on different attributes of the request and different pathways of the business process, we can now take that history and make a prediction, just like a 3-and-2 home in Southern Oregon, right? So all of this feeds each other, but it's all tied to, really understanding how to use all of these different components of the platform, sequence them, and then there's just, like I said, so many benefits that you can realize from that. All right. let's see. So let's shift gears a little bit. That's how to think about, what the platform does in very simple terms, and how we can sequence the work. And so we alluded to a little bit about needing the right data and being able to get to that information, because what that's going to do is, open up the door to insights into this process. But there's also a number of other things, a number of other benefits that we're going to get out of it. And so, I just wanted to talk about catalog items versus record producers very briefly, and then we'll hop into the data model and how you can think about designing your table structures to realize maximum value from how table inheritance and the data model works on the platform. Okay, so catalog items in ITSM is great, right? I mean, this is one of the most heavily used applications in the platform, and it's awesome for what it does. And there's also a misconception around the requested item table, and because it's used so heavily, its intent is to be used for ITSM, right? So it was designed for an IT service catalog, a large one. And, it really makes sense in an ITIL context, because what we want is a lot of collaboration on these different requests. If you think about a laptop, provisioning a laptop, taking it out of a workroom, there's a lot of kind of automated and physical things that need to get done with it. So these requests are generally routed across a large number of departments. In IT, a lot of people have similar skill sets and are doing very similar things. And so, this is great for IT. It also, because we're connecting these requests with, with change management, with, so many different ITIL processes. Again, what we want is coarse granularity, where a lot of people can view these things, and then they can be related to other aspects of the data model and the ServiceNow platform. So this is awesome. But what we have here is a lot of complexity on the back end. And so this is a total eye chart. What we have here is sort of how the record producer or the catalog item is configured. And so that's what generates the form on the service catalog. And it's confusing because if we look at the upper right, there's basically two primary tables that configure these forms, right? The middle lighter green tables, these are all what configure, the questions and the different options on the form itself. But the catalog item on the upper right, so this is one of the original tables. And this is what is the primary table for ITSM Request Management. The record producer extends the catalog item. And again, that creates a form in this, the service portal. But there's an important difference between the two. If we look at over on the right here, the requested item, and then the variable ownership and the options, is from an ITSM request from that catalog item, it's going to generate, for any type of catalog item, it's going to generate this requested item record. And the information associated with this broad variety of ITSM requests is kind of so diverse that the actual data from the request is stored in this data hierarchy in these options. And so what happens is it's very difficult to get to this information. So in Flow Designer, we have to extract the catalog items. When we're creating a report in a dashboard, we can really only do that report across one type of request item, because the system has to know what pathways to follow to get to all of these different responses to all of the different variables. And this is really confusing, but the point is this isn't ideal from an entitlement perspective, because it's associated with ITSM, but also in the context of custom applications, but also it makes it very difficult for us to do those things like what we wanted to, like we talked about for the marketing request use case, where we can accumulate this information, access it easily, and use it in the business process and report against it. So the major difference here is that this record producer, right? And the reason why it's so confusing is it extends the catalog item. It generates this custom app record, right? This white box here, and it's going to generate one database record. And the major difference is the information that the user, the requester submitted, is stored directly in this record. And the ease of use behind this just can't be emphasized enough. So rather than having to utilize platform constructs to pull all of this information out of the requested item in the context of a record producer and utilizing it for a custom application with App Engine, all of the information is stored in that one custom app record. And so very confusing. If there's any questions, I'm happy to either address that now, or let's see. Actually, we do have one Q&A. Let's see. Okay, Dustin, I will get to your question at the end. Yes, we do to some extent have. Dustin asked about some templates that can be used for business requirements. So we'll talk about that in Q&A. All right. If there's more questions around this is an extremely important concept. So feel free to pop those in the Q&A, or we can talk about those later during the actual Q&A part of the Academy. Okay, and so what this means here is that we're using a single inheritance model for this requested item. So the task table is extremely important in the ServiceNow system, right? So really, my best guidance, and I think general best practice for the platform, would be if you have something that people need to, if you have something where workflow is involved with this, where someone needs to approve it or complete work, then you should always be extending the task table when you create a custom task. And the reason why is that extending this table allows a child table, right? The table that is extending this task table to accumulate all of the functionality and data associated with the parent table. And so in this case, what's so important about this task table is that is all of the key things related to workflow: approvals, state, right? Has this task been completed? SLAs, and also the additional comments and work notes that is associated with this work record. And so if you look at this here, this requested item, it extends tasks, so we know that we can track the work. But remember how we said none of the actual data is stored in the requested item table itself. It's stored in these additional tables where you have to walk database references to get to the data for the specific requested item. And so from a custom development standpoint, that's really not ideal. That's not what we want, because we want to easily get to the information provided when this business process was started, so we can make those decisions, right? So we can easily access them for predictions and for inference. So this is how the requested item table is set up. And let's see, we have another question. Eric, so Eric asked if we can show catalog specific data in the record producer. This is all I have. Like I said, we're not going into the platform, but one of the things that we do want to do either in December or in February is talk about how to write generators in code using JavaScript to move a requested item to a scoped record producer. And so we'll definitely look at it at that time. All right. So that's the stand-up, right? So that is how ITSM Service Catalog requests utilize a single table, and then this references to all of these other records to actually hold the data associated with the request. And so there's a lot of problems with that. It just makes the that makes development much more difficult. So let's just revisit very quickly, what we talked about for a typical request fulfill app that is for a department. So, we have these different requests and services where this department's end users can realize value from the services that that department provides. And then, in the execution of those services, we're going to have these different inquiries and these different issues, right? These different ways that that the requesters can communicate with the marketing department. And I just have some examples of these different services and these different questions and these different issues that they might have, because as you can imagine, all of these different items are going to have different data or different fields in these tables that's going to be important and specific to these different work streams. So let's look at a single inheritance model. And so, this is similar to how catalog items are structured. But the major difference here is that we're extending tasks, right? So we're accumulating all of those capabilities that that we want related to work, right? The approvals, the SLAs, being able to assign to an individual in a group. But what we're doing now is, since we're only using one table for all of those different work streams, what we have to do is we have to put all of those different fields, all of that different data into that one table. And so this is better because, that data now resides in that one record. And so we can access it very easily. But it's not really ideal because typically there's going to be some overlap between all of these different requests and inquiries and issues. And so you have to spend a lot of time making sure we're mapping the right fields to these different task types, or else you're just going to end up with a bunch of kind of similar fields. And so that isn't really what we want. And then also, some people in the marketing department might be, primarily focused on these issues and inquiries, and other people might only be interested in fulfillment around the service requests. And so we can't control the access at a table level, and controlling access at the table level is really what we want, because we can very definitively understand the group of users that have access. So from a security standpoint, that's really what we want. But by grouping all of these different requests into the single table, what we have to do now is look at like a category or a subcategory or an attribute in the record, and then partition the access between the different users that way. So that isn't really great. And then another really important side effect of this is that by utilizing the same table in different contexts, what we have to do now is add logic to say, well, based on this particular attribute of this task, we feel like we've identified it as a service request, and we have to adjust the view, right, or the inquiry or issue, because we're not going to want to see all of the different fields for all of the different types of tasks. So this is better from a reporting standpoint, and to be able to utilize and access the information in a business process, but it introduces overhead associated with just utilizing the single table. So another approach is to use still stay in the single inheritance model, but then utilize different tables. Again, because they're all different work items, we're always extending the task table, but split the requests into different tables. And so this is pretty awesome, right? Because now what we can do is we can say, okay, these different user groups within the marketing department, some are going to be handling the service requests, some are going to be handling the inquiries. We can control their access at the table, so very clear who has access to what. But the side effect of this is that if we want to look at the marketing department as a whole, right? If we want to look at how long is all of these tasks that the marketing department is performing, how long do each of these take? It's more difficult because now we have to span a number of different tables, and it's possible you can create views, you can introduce some additional logic into reports. So there are benefits to this, but there are also some drawbacks to this approach as well. The most sophisticated approach, and I mean, to be fair, it does also utilize the highest number of tables. It consumes the most of tables. But this approach of data design will give you the most control and flexibility when you're looking at grouping similar work, but that is divided into distinct work streams. So what we can do here is we can take we can use this intermediate table where we are extending the task table for marketing task, right? And so what we can do is put all of the fields that are shared across all of the different work streams into this table. What we can do then is extend that marketing task table, and remember how a child table always accumulates the functionality and the data elements of the parent table, but that also extends through multiple levels of inheritance. So when we create these more specific tables that align to these different work streams within the marketing department, what we can do now is put the specific fields in those tables, and then the common fields in this intermediate marketing task table. And so why would we want to do that? What that allows us to do is to provide access and to view data both from a coarse-grained and fine-grained perspective. So if you wanted to only view the marketing requests and how long those took, then you could write a report for that very easily. But if you wanted to create a report where you wanted to view how many of these different requests were serviced and how long each of them took, what you could do is report off of the marketing task table, because then that would then include all of the child tables as well. And so from being able to either access one specific data item, one specific work stream, or to access all of them from the marketing department, this can provide that flexibility. And what it will also do is, when we think about a security standpoint, what we can do is we can either grant access to all of these different tasks very easily by granting a user access to the marketing task. And so by default, they would have access to the child tables. Or what we could do is grant access to only one or two of these tables. And then that would allow those users to only access that table. And so, so this really kind of allows you to utilize the most of the platform capabilities out of the box too. And so remember how I said, if you are usually utilizing one table for these different work streams, then you're going to have to add additional logic to control which fields are displayed depending on which work stream, the context of the work stream that someone is looking at the data. But what this does is it introduces the ability to use essentially out of the box build patterns for these child tables, but still gives you the ability to control the access and view the information either at the marketing department as a whole or at the workstream level. All right. So that was a very quick tour. We talked about a number of different things. We talked about how to structure or how to look at the core building blocks in the platform and how to structure those. We talked about how an out-of-the-box product works, where they're using the same table across a large number of different requests, and then a number of different approaches for you to design your data based on your different use cases and sort of how much you needed to control the access across these requests. And so I'll just recap the questions that were in Q&A, and then if anyone has some live questions, we can hop to that.